At our family barbecue, my parents called me useless in front of everyone, laughing like I was some long-running joke. But 5 minutes later, my sister's boss showed up, took one look at me and said, "Wait, why is the CEO here?" What happened next changed everything. Before we begin, if you've ever been overlooked by your own family, if they've dismissed your worth just because you chose a quieter path, then take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your story. You're not alone, and you deserve to be seen. Let me tell you what happened that day. It was a Saturday in late May. One of those Texas days where the air feels thick like syrup and the sky glares down like it's angry at you. I'd almost skipped the barbecue altogether. I was behind on contracts. My team had just launched a new security protocol, and my inbox was on fire. But Taylor, my younger sister, texted me 3 times. "Come, it'll be fun. Mom even made that bean salad you like." So I went. Not for the beans, for the hope that maybe, for once, it wouldn't feel like I was walking into someone else's house with my name scratched off the door. I parked across the street from the house I grew up in. The grass was still patchy in the same places. The same peeling gnome stood at the foot of the walkway. As I stepped out of the car, I straightened my blazer, out of habit more than anything. No one would care what I wore. They never did. Mom answered the door with a drink already in hand. "Oh," she said, "you made it." Not hi, not how are you, just that flat, slightly surprised tone that made me feel like a bad idea someone forgot to cancel. Taylor was already in the backyard, glowing like she always did. She worked in public relations for a luxury skincare brand, always looked polished. Always sounded rehearsed. She hugged me and whispered something about how glad she was I came. It almost felt sincere. I made myself a plate, sat near the edge of the patio, and tried not to mind that no one asked me about my life. They never did. Not when I was freelancing IT work from a basement apartment. Not when I was building Shield Core from scratch with $20 in my checking account. Not even when we hit our first million in revenue last year. They didn't know. Because I didn't tell them. Not anymore. The last time I tried, 2 Thanksgivings ago, I told them I'd started a company. That it was growing. My dad nodded and asked if I was still dating that guy who fixed phones. My mom said maybe it was time to look into teaching certification. So I learned to keep it to myself. Until my father turned toward me, tong in hand, grease-stained apron tied around his waist, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, at least one of my daughters figured life out. The other one's still finding herself. I guess." Laughter. Not cruel, casual, familiar, the kind that stings because it's so rehearsed. Then Mom chimed in with her signature smile and sip. Madison always had big ideas. Just never much follow-through. I didn't speak, just smiled, lips tight, and chewed my cold potato salad. No one said a word to defend me. Not even Taylor. She looked at her phone and acted like she didn't hear a thing. I sat there, surrounded by paper plates and folding chairs, thinking about the 40-plus people who worked under me, the elderly clients whose life savings we protected, the advisory board who trusted my vision. None of it mattered here. Not one bit. To them, I was just the awkward, underachieving daughter who dabbled in tech. And then, she arrived. Taylor's boss. Her name was Dana. Older, sharp eyes, expensive shoes. She had the kind of presence that made people stand up straighter without realizing it. And the moment she saw me, she stopped cold. "Wait," she said slowly. "Why is the CEO here?" Everything froze. My dad's spatula hung mid-air. My mom blinked like someone had thrown cold water on her. Taylor turned, confused. "And Dana?" She smiled. "I'm sorry, are you Madison Blake? Of Shield Core?" I nodded. She took a step closer, smiling with genuine warmth. "You're the reason we finally secured our data systems at D&V. Your platform is brilliant. You saved us hundreds of thousands in losses. I've quoted you in board meetings." The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I've ever heard. I think my mother tried to smile, but her mouth didn't quite cooperate. My father set his spatula down, slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was still hosting a barbecue or had just wandered into someone else's life. Taylor, her face flushed so quickly it looked like a sunburn. But it wasn't the sun. Dana kept talking, unaware of the tension tightening around us like a rubber band ready to snap. You built something remarkable, she said, eyes locked on me. Our CIO said your team's turnaround time was faster than anyone we've worked with. And your privacy protocols? Gold standard. I nodded. Barely. I wasn't used to this kind of attention in front of them. My mom finally spoke. I didn't know you two knew each other. Dana turned politely. We're not personal friends, if that's what you mean. Madison's company provides our cybersecurity platform. Her work is impressive, especially for such a lean operation. I glanced at Taylor, who looked like her throat had gone dry. Then Dana added, almost offhand, and I had no idea she was your daughter. Madison never mentioned it. Of course I hadn't. I don't talk about my family in professional settings, because what would I say? That they think I'm a wandering disappointment? That I've learned how to shrink just enough to fit back into the version of me they still hold in their minds? No, I never mentioned them. I think that was the moment something cracked open. Dana was called away to speak with Taylor's team. Everyone else kind of stood there, unsure of what to say. I picked up my plate, tossed the half-eaten salad in the bin, and walked quietly to the side gate. I didn't say goodbye, but I didn't cry either. I sat in my car with the air conditioning running, staring at my hands. My phone buzzed. 3 messages from coworkers, 1 from my assistant, and a Slack ping from our cybersecurity lead. Even away from the office, I was holding pieces together. Still, in that backyard, they looked at me like I had just stepped off a spaceship. And somehow, that was worse than the ridicule. Because the silence that followed Dana's words? That wasn't pride. That was disbelief. As if success didn't look like me. As if they had to squint and tilt their heads to recognize someone they thought they'd written off years ago. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. My parents had always spoken about Taylor like she was a trophy. Beautiful, magnetic, successful in a way they could wrap their heads around. She did media. They could brag about media. She helped organize that gala for the mayor's wife. She's on her way to a corner office. They never really understood me. I was the girl who sat in her room for hours, building things that didn't make noise. I fixed broken printers at 12. I coded my first firewall at 16. But all they saw was a kid, addicted to screens. Even when I moved out and stopped asking for anything, no rent help. No calls, no birthday drama. I stayed in their blind spot. Safe there, small. That night, after I drove home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and watched the lights of Austin flicker in the distance. I thought about all the people we'd protected this year, seniors. Small businesses, nonprofits. People who didn't understand cyber threats but trusted us to stand between them and the chaos. People who wrote in with handwritten thank you notes. My team respected me. My clients relied on me. The board backed me. But my own parents? Still saw me as the quiet one who never quite figured it out. That barbecue didn't make me bitter. It clarified something I'd long suspected but never fully admitted. They were never going to see me. Not really. Unless someone else told them who I was. And even then, it wasn't pride I saw on their faces. It was embarrassment. Because the truth wasn't just that I'd succeeded. The truth was that they hadn't noticed. Not once. And I had stopped needing them to. The next morning, my mother called. I let it ring. Then I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't quite bring myself to hear her voice, not yet. A few hours later, she texted, "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. The words were simple, but something in me tightened. Not because she wanted to talk, but because she hadn't said sorry. Not yet. Not for the way she and Dad had laughed at me like I was furniture that hadn't lived up to expectations. That Sunday was quiet. I cleaned the apartment, answered emails, and watered the plants I always forgot about during the week. But everything felt a little louder. The sound of silence when someone finally sees you for who you are, and chooses to do nothing about it. On Monday, I was back in the office by 7. I greeted the receptionist, stopped to chat with our junior developer, and reviewed a client audit report. Everyone called me Madison, not Maddie, not Kiddo, not the other one, just Madison, like that was enough. Around 10, I got a message from Dana, Taylor's boss. Impressed doesn't even begin to describe it. You've built something that matters. Let's talk more soon. I replied politely. And I meant it, but I also knew I'd likely never see her again. That moment at the barbecue? That wasn't for business. That was for me. That night, Taylor called. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was tight, clipped. I didn't know, she said. I sat on the edge of my bed. Didn't know what? That you run Shield Corps. That you're the CEO. Why wouldn't you tell anyone? I swallowed. Because no one ever asked. That's not fair, she said. You never said anything. I did. I said quietly, twice. But I wasn't wearing heels or talking about champagne fundraisers. So it didn't register. She went silent. Then, more quietly, you made me look stupid. I let that sink in. She wasn't angry that I was successful. She was angry that it disrupted the hierarchy. That I'd been cast as the underachiever for so long. My success felt like a betrayal. I didn't do it to make you look bad. I said, I just did the work. Well, now Mom and Dad are freaking out. They feel awful. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Do they feel awful because of how they treated me? Or because they found out in front of someone important? She didn't answer, just exhaled. They want to have dinner. She said, apologize. Make it right. I didn't respond right away. I thought about it. Thought about what I would have given to hear those words 5, 10 years ago, but something had shifted in me. Maybe, I said, but not this week. I ended the call and stared out my window. The city lights blurred just slightly through the glass. They wanted to apologize now. After a stranger validated me. After a title, CEO, made them reconsider their opinions. Not after the hard years. The silent years. The building years. Only now. When it was safe to be proud. And I wasn't sure if that was enough. 3 days later, I got an invitation, another family dinner. This time, smaller, just the 5 of us. Taylor, Mom, Dad, and me. I stood in front of my closet longer than I should have. Reached for something soft, something simple, no suits, no laptops, just me. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were already seated. Taylor looked down at her water glass. My mother stood and gave me a hug, awkward, hesitant, but real. My father didn't stand, but he looked me in the eye. You look well, he said. Thanks, I replied. The waitress came. We ordered. Small talk filled the air like smoke, thin, hard to breathe. Then my mom cleared her throat. Madison, we're sorry. Truly, we didn't know what you were doing. We should have asked. I nodded, not out of forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement. Dad chimed in. Your work, it's important. Dana said you're doing something that matters. That you're helping people. My throat tightened. I didn't want to cry. But my hands trembled under the table. I've always tried to, I said, even when no one noticed. We noticed, my mother whispered, but I knew she hadn't. Not really, and that was okay. We finished dinner. No fireworks, no grand reconciliation, but they looked at me differently. Like maybe I wasn't the useless one anymore. Or maybe, just maybe, I never had been. And they were finally catching up. A few weeks passed. The apology lingered in the air like a scent that wouldn't quite fade, noticeable. But hard to trust. I didn't bring it up again. And neither did they. We spoke a little more than before. Mostly through group texts Taylor initiated. My parents were softer in tone now. Less casual with their dismissals. Though old habits didn't die easily. It was Taylor who surprised me most. She called one afternoon, out of the blue, asking if we could grab lunch. We met at a quiet cafe tucked behind an office complex. The kind of place that sold overpriced salads and lukewarm coffee. She was already seated when I walked in. Her hair pulled back, phone face down, her fingers picking at a napkin. I'm not mad anymore, she said before I could sit. I raised an eyebrow. You were mad? At first, she admitted. It felt like you pulled the rug out from under me. Made me look like I didn't know my own sister. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to say. She sipped her water. But I've been thinking a lot. About how we grew up. About how Mom and Dad always talked about me. And you kind of disappeared into the background. And I let them. I looked at her. Really looked. She was still polished. Still poised. But her voice cracked just enough to sound real. I didn't mean to erase you. She said quietly. My chest tightened. Not out of pain, out of recognition. Because for once, she wasn't playing the golden child. She was just Taylor, my sister. I nodded. I know. I think I've spent so much time being their star that I never stopped to wonder if I even wanted that role. She said. And then you, this whole time, you were building something. Quietly, without applause. And now, you're the one everyone respects. I gave a small smile. Respect doesn't mean much if it only comes after a reveal. She sat back, sighed. Yeah, I guess it doesn't. We didn't fix everything in that lunch. But something softened between us. A thread frayed by years of imbalance began. Just barely, to stitch back together. A few days later, I was back in the office. We had a quarterly report to present. And our team was finalizing proposals for new client onboarding. I was mid-meeting when my assistant tapped on the door. Your parents are here, she said, blinking like she wasn't sure she'd heard herself right. They asked if you had a moment. I froze. I hadn't given them the address. They must have asked Taylor. I stepped out, heart thudding harder than it should have. There they were. Dad in a pressed polo. Mom holding a small box. We didn't want to interrupt, she said quickly, but we were nearby. Thought maybe we could see where you work. My throat was dry. You came, just to see the office? Dad looked around, taking in the clean lines. The wall of achievement plaques. The framed notes from thankful clients. We didn't realize it was this real. I let them in. I gave them the tour. Showed them the development wing. The server room. The break area with the cold brew tap my engineers had begged for. They asked questions. They listened. And then, back at the front, Mom opened the box. It was a photo frame. Inside, a childhood picture of me, age 12, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, tinkering with the family's old computer. Its guts spilled open beside me. Beside it, a more recent photo from a news article featuring me after a local tech award. I thought it was time we put this up in the house, she said, next to Taylor's. I took it gently. Held it longer than I needed to. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. And it did. Not because it fixed the past. But because it acknowledged it. As they turned to go, Dad paused. I'm proud of you, he said, voice low. I don't say it enough. I didn't see it, but I see it now. I stood at the glass doors long after they left. Frame still in my hands. Some wounds don't heal clean. Some never quite disappear. But sometimes, they scar over in a way that doesn't hurt anymore. Sometimes, you get to be seen not for who they thought you were, but for who you've quietly become. And that, in its own quiet way, is enough. That weekend, I skipped the usual catch-up calls, the casual check-ins, the quiet expectations to drop by. I needed space, not because I was angry, but because something inside me had shifted. It was subtle. Like the way your favorite chair starts feeling uncomfortable without warning. I'd sat in the same family role for so long. I didn't realize I could stand up. I spent Saturday walking the trail by the river. No phone, no earbuds, just the wind and the sound of other people living their lives. I thought about the last few months. About the way a single sentence, "Why is the CEO here?" had unraveled years of quiet assumptions. Not just theirs, mine, too. It's a strange thing. When people start seeing you differently, you think it'll feel vindicating. Maybe even triumphant. But really, it's disorienting. It's like someone switched the lights on in a room you didn't know was dark. And you realize how much you'd memorized the shape of the shadows. Taylor had been texting more often. Sending small things. A podcast she liked. A recipe she tried. A photo of Mom laughing over something she'd said. And beneath it all, I sensed something new. Not guilt. Exactly. More like effort. Effort I wasn't used to receiving. Tuesday morning, I walked into the office early. The lobby was still quiet. The cleaning crew long gone. On my desk sat a sealed envelope. No name. Just, for Madison, written in neat, careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. Not typed. Handwritten. It was from Dad. He never wrote letters. Not even birthday cards. Those were always Mom's job. I unfolded it slowly, unsure what I was bracing for. Maddie, I guess I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth. When you were a kid, I didn't understand you. You were quiet, always off in your head. Taylor was easier, she talked. She sparkled. You watched things, fixed things, built things. I didn't know how to raise someone like that. And instead of learning, I shrugged it off, called it a phase. I thought I was doing what was best, pushing you to be more like the world I knew. But you weren't meant for that world. You built your own. And now, watching you stand in it, I realize how small my view was. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into the back of my desk drawer, not to hide it, but to keep it close. It wasn't eloquent. It didn't fix everything, but it was honest, and that counted for something. Later that day, Taylor came by the office. She brought lunch, which she never used to do. We sat on the rooftop terrace, nothing fancy. Just metal chairs and the sound of downtown traffic below. Mom told me you got Dad's letter, she said, passing me a sandwich. I nodded. Did you cry? I smiled. A little. She looked out over the skyline. He cried when he wrote it. I saw him. That surprised me more than anything. I've been thinking, she went on, unwrapping her food. We always made you the weird one. But you were just ahead. I let out a soft laugh. You really think that? She met my eyes. I know it, and I'm sorry, too. It wasn't a performance. There was no audience, just 2 sisters, slowly relearning how to speak to each other without the scaffolding of old stories. After she left, I sat there alone for a while, watching the clouds roll in, listening to the wind tap gently against the railings. And I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their approval, their recognition, their warmth. And now, here it was. But the strange thing? I didn't need it anymore. Not the way I used to. Because I wasn't standing in the same place. I wasn't that quiet girl on the edges of the family barbecue, biting my tongue while they laughed. I was the one who'd kept going. Even when no one clapped. Even when no one saw. I'd built something strong. Not just a company, but a self I could live inside. And now, finally, I was home. A month passed. By then, the barbecue was nothing more than a memory that sometimes bubbled up while I brushed my teeth or waited at a stoplight. It didn't sting the way it used to. The moment still lived somewhere in me. My parents' laughter. The sudden hush. Dana's voice cutting through it like a spotlight, but it had settled. Like dust on a shelf. Still there, just not floating. What lingered wasn't the humiliation. It was the clarity. One evening, as the sky softened into that peach blue stretch that only Texas gets right, I took a walk past my old neighborhood. I don't know why, I hadn't been there in years. Not since Taylor moved out and the backyard parties became more sporadic. But my feet led me back, as if checking to see if the ghosts had locked up for good. The house looked the same. Porch light flickering. Dad's old lawn chair leaning against the shed. A small wind chime tinkled by the front window. The one I used to sneak past after curfew. I stood across the street and watched it like a stranger might, detached. Curious, trying to remember what it felt like to belong inside those walls. My phone buzzed. It was a photo from my mom. She'd finally hung the framed picture, the one with me as a 12-year-old beside the article clipping from the Business Journal. She'd placed it on the mantle, right next to Taylor's college graduation photo. No caption. Just the photo. That was her way of saying she understood now. That it was real to her. That I was real to her. I sat down on the curb, rested my arms on my knees, and let the night fall around me. Funny thing is, you wait your whole life for certain words. For recognition. For validation. And then one day it arrives, not with trumpets. Not with flowers. But in a text message sent without fanfare. Under the glow of a porch light that flickers. It's never how you imagine it. It's quieter. I walked home slowly that night, letting the silence wrap around me like a shawl. The next morning, back at work, my lead engineer brought me a card. It was handwritten, sealed in a small envelope. He said it came from a client. I opened it. It was from an elderly couple in Ohio. We'd helped them recover their stolen retirement fund a few months back. They had written just 2 lines. "Thank you for protecting us. We sleep better now, knowing you're there." I ran my fingers over the words. They were shaky, written in blue ink, probably with a hand that trembled. I thought, this is why I did it. Not to prove a point. Not to force respect from the people who couldn't offer it before. But for this. For someone else's peace. That afternoon, I called my parents. I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I just called. Dad answered. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "I was just talking about you." I smiled. "All good things. I hope. All the best things," he said. Then, quieter. "Always. We didn't go over the past again. We didn't need to. Some stories don't require retelling. Just the courage to end them right." That Sunday, I went to brunch with Taylor. She brought a notepad. "What's that for?" I asked, laughing. "I thought maybe you could help me come up with a cybersecurity plan for my team," she said, and I wanted to take notes. It was small, but it mattered. We ate. We talked. We laughed in that easy way we never used to. There were no pointed comparisons. No jokes about who did what better. Just 2 women, sisters, figuring out how to walk alongside each other. Instead of in shadow and spotlight. As we said goodbye, she hugged me longer than usual. "I'm glad you didn't give up on us," she whispered. "I'm glad I didn't give up on myself," I said. And that, more than anything, was the truth. I had stopped shrinking. I had stopped apologizing. I had stopped waiting for someone else to tell me I mattered. I already knew. Because worth isn't proven. It's lived. And finally, quietly, I was living mine. The following Friday, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Nothing fancy. Just a handful of friends from work. A few clients who had become something more than just business contacts. And some of the early team who had been with me since the beginning. Back when Shield Core was nothing but an idea scribbled on sticky notes stuck to my bedroom wall. The house was warm, lit with soft lamps, filled with the scent of slow-cooked chili and freshly baked cornbread. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, where someone was telling a story about our first product demo crashing mid-presentation. And everyone, even those who had heard it a dozen times, still laughed. It wasn't loud, or lavish, or Instagram-worthy, but it was mine. I walked through the rooms slowly, checking on refills, exchanging quiet conversations, and noticing something I hadn't really felt before, not like this. I belonged, not because anyone told me I did, but because I had built the kind of life that didn't require permission. Around 8, my parents arrived. I hadn't expected them to come. I'd extended the invitation out of politeness. Maybe hope, but not expectation. Still, there they were. Dad with his favorite cardigan. Mom holding a lemon pie wrapped in a faded kitchen towel I recognized from childhood. They looked unsure, like they were stepping into someone else's territory. Which, in a way, they were. I greeted them at the door, hugged my mom, shook my dad's hand, then pulled him into an embrace that caught both of us off guard. "Come in," I said, guiding them inside. My colleagues greeted them warmly. One of my senior engineers introduced himself to my father, then said, without prompting, "Your daughter's built something amazing here. It's an honor working with her." My father smiled, but it was my mother's eyes that filled with something quiet and deep. We sat down eventually, plates in our laps, voices overlapping in conversation. At one point, Taylor showed up too. She was late, but unapologetically herself, with a bottle of wine in one hand and a gift bag in the other. "Just a little something," she said, handing it to me. "Saw it and thought of you." Inside was a sleek, leather-bound notebook. On the front, embossed in tiny gold letters, were the words, "Speak softly, build loud." I ran my fingers over the cover, swallowed the sudden lump in my throat, and said thank you. She sat beside me, nudging my shoulder. I meant it. For a while, We didn't talk, just listened to the conversation flowing around us. Someone asked about our company mission, and I watched Taylor lean forward to answer. She built Shield Core to protect people, she said, before I could speak, especially those who can't protect themselves. It's not just a tech company, it's a lifeline. She said it like she believed it. Because she did. Later that night, when the last guest had left and the kitchen was clean again, I stood on the back porch with my dad. The air was cool, and the cicadas were humming in the trees. He sipped his coffee, then cleared his throat. I used to think success had a look, he said. Briefcases, neckties, office towers. He looked out over the yard. But I was wrong. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to let him speak in his own time. You've built something, he said, quieter now. Not just the company. This. All of this. A life with meaning. That's success. And I see it now. I turned to face him. I never needed you to be proud, I said softly. I just needed you to see me. I do, he replied. And I'm sorry it took me so long. My mother joined us a minute later, draping a shawl over her shoulders. You know, she said, glancing around. This reminds me of the night you were born. The world felt still, like it was waiting to see who you'd become. I didn't know what to say to that. But I smiled. We stood there for a long time. Not saying much. Just being. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was performing, or compensating, or holding my breath. I was just me. And that was finally enough.